Hey, what's happening, friends? Today I'm going to make a video showing a tutorial on how to set up your own Vesc. This is assuming you have a completed build, your entire controller box just ready to go. You've already figured out everything else about battery compatibility, making sure if you're using an FM harness, you've already taken care of the reverse polarity issue. So let's get started. Step one is going to be installing the box. Okay, let's go ahead and turn it on. Hey, look, switch is already on, so we have power. We're good to go there. Let's go ahead and connect our foot pad. Alright, so now this next step, we're going to change a few settings. We're going to set up the motor, we're going to set up an IMU configuration. So I'm going to record everything on my screen right here and post it up over here in the video. So we're going to connect to this one. Alright, I'm going to go to real-time data, and I want to see how the IMU looks so far. So right now, it's upside down. It thinks it's upside down because we have a lid mount, so it is upside down. We still got to set all that up. Okay, we'll teach that in just a minute. We know this one right now does not have the flow package installed, but we'll get to loading that later. First things first, we want to set up the motor and then set up the IMU. So let's do the motor. In order to do this, you need to have your board in a place where your motor can spin freely. Right now we don't have that, so let me get a brace and set it up on support the bumper area. Okay, so let's run through the motor setup real fast. I'm going to go set up motors. Load default parameters, always say no. And it's a generic, we're going to override the values there. Hit next. And it's a large outrunner. We're going to override these values. I'm going to set that to 2000, and our motor poles, we've got 30. And right here you have an opportunity to set up your battery. I have in this one an 18S. We're going to tell it we have 18 batteries in series. And for right here, for the battery capacity, I've got an 8.4 amp hour. So I'll go ahead and correct that, put 8.4. Okay. And advanced battery regen, I'm allowed 35 amps, and I'm allowed 90 amps for battery current. So let me go to 90 and hit next. Wheel diameter, I've got an 11.5-inch tire here, so that's 292. An 11-inch would be 280. It's 279 and some change, but 280. And we're going to remind it here, this is a direct drive. Go ahead and put it back up to 30 poles and run detection. We're going to uncheck that, hit OK. Hey, it's spinning that motor. Looks like detection has worked. Now it's going to check the different Hall sensors as it rolls through the phases of the magnets. It's going to go backward. And this is a good learning point here. I got disconnected during the timer. One thing you'll know about Apple phones, their Bluetooth disconnects from this app about every 2 minutes. So what we're going to do is redo all of that. Let's see if it still keeps any of my settings in here. Yes, that's all good. Put that back to 18. Direct drive, 292, 30. Okay. Let's do this again and see if we don't time out this time. This part should be jittery, and then it'll run backward, also be jittery. And let's see what we say. Success. Very nice. Looking at those values, that's about normal. So I'm going to hit OK. Test the direction. I'll hit forward. So that's good. And hit finish. If I hit forward and it turns backward, you'll hit that switch for invert motor direction, and you'll verify now it goes forward when I say forward, and you'll save it from there. Time to do the IMU setup now. Let me go ahead and start screen recording here. Okay, IMU. Now there's a specific order you're going to want to do these in, and I'll go ahead and mark that up over here with little arrows that you go in a certain order. If you go out of order, you're going to have some weird behavior, so just follow along and you'll be all right. Starting with IMU configure. Configurator. That's a strange word. Configurator. Alright, IMU detected is true. Now we're a balanced skateboard, so we're going to hit save down there. So let's start with the gyroscope. To find the gyroscope, the IMU must be left in a stable position without any vibration. Any orientation is acceptable. So you can just leave it right here, wait for those numbers to stop moving, and then hit save. Alright, so let's take a look here. We've already done the IMU configurator, we've done the gyroscope, so now let's run through the orientation. Wait for that to stable out completely, then hit save. This says both the pitch and roll angles leveled out. Save. This is also asking for the pitch and roll angles to be leveled out, so you're not really doing anything in this step except being patient. Okay, let's hit save. Wait, it's still wiggling from 7 to 10 there. Alright, that's good. Pitch angle raised to roughly 45 degrees. That is this right here. Saying a yaw offset of 0. And that's it for that one. Now the next one, the accelerometer calibration, we got to do a few things with it. First one's going to be a nose down. So let's get moving on. Accelerometer. Boop. All right, the X. We're going to go nose down with it. You're going to know you're doing the right movement because you want the value to be a positive as close to value of 1 as you can. So right here we're going to hold it upright and just wait for it to stabilize. I'm going to keep tilting it until the value begins dropping. That's dropping. Okay, let's come back and see if we can get a higher number than 978. Okay. We're going to keep going this way until the value drops. Alright, so 982 looks like our max value there. So at any time, if this value goes crazy and it's way higher than the resting value, just hit clear max and let it restabilize. So save. Now we're doing Y calibration. For this one, we need to put it on its side with the power, not the power button, the charge port facing up. Just let it sit there, be patient. And once it stabilizes, we're going to do the same thing where we're going to try to find a value higher or lower. So let's go ahead and roll it toward me until it starts dropping. Okay, that's dropping. Go back to flat, and I'm going to push it away from me. And it's dropping. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit save. Now the Z. Now this one you just want to set it flat in a nice flat surface and let it stabilize. Okay, I'm going to lift the tail now. See if I can get an increase in that value. Oh, we're going down now, so let me set it back. I'm going to lift up and see if I can get an increased value. Oh, that's it. 962 looks like our number. And hit save. How do we know if we effectively calibrated the IMU? Let's jump over to the real-time data page. If I lift on this guy, there we go. It's showing me all those letters. They should look like this when you lift the nose. And we got freeze and reconnect. Looks like we've got a slight tilt going on here. So in order to correct that tilt, we would just have to run through this whole thing again on a perfectly flat, level surface until it's satisfied. Most people ignore a tilt of that magnitude because when you're in real life situation, you're going to be camber with your heel toe motion anyway. So that right there is close enough for most cases. But if you're a perfectionist like myself, you're going to want to go back and perfectly plane everything out. But this is an instructional video, so we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, we've already done the motor config, we've done the IMU setup. Next we need to tweak some values. So we're going to go in here, let me start my screen recording back over. Alright, we're going to go over to motor config. Going to start out in general, and we're going to set our current limit. So right here it's given default values based on what it thinks we should do for this motor during the motor detection. Typically people run at either 100, 100, or 120, 120, or 120, 100, and I'll explain a little bit of that. For the test, safety-wise, when we test this foot pad and we engage the motor, we don't want this thing to have full power and just take off. So we're going to limit this to 10 amps. Forward and backward. And you can swipe that just real quick to get to the right button. We're going to hit right. I already know the value that needs to go in the absolute maximum current. That's based off of the little Fokker's capability. We're going to get back to that. All right, looking at all these other settings, that looks good. We just do a refresh. You see that blue bar at the bottom. All right, those values are holding. Let's move on. Voltage. The battery voltage cutoff start and end. What this is, it does its own sort of throttling. You can set this up to be at the low end of your battery to where it will reduce the amount of power that it's sending to the motor when the battery's getting low. Doesn't feel good though. You go to push it and it's weak. And I personally don't use this. I set these values below what I would consider my low battery. So let me just show you, for a 75 volt battery, empty is going to be around the 54. How to calculate that? How many batteries do you have? 18. So the low, 3 volts is considered low on a battery. So what's 18 times 3? 54. But we don't want to set it right then, because when your battery gets low and you're climbing a hill or you quickly accelerate, you're going to have voltage sag. And if you hit that voltage sag right when you're accelerating and you have this feature activated, it'll cut your power and you'll just drop your nose right into it. So let's calculate it at 2.6. That'd be 46.8 volt. So let's get back over here. And what's the default on that? Default is 10. Okay, at least it rounds out the change in the end. That's what I say. We're going to start at 48 volt and we're going to end at 45 volt. That just gives it a small range there. And hit right. RPM, leave it as is unless you want to set a maximum speed limit for the board. But if you ever hit that and you're still accelerating, you're just going to go down. So leave as is unless you're playing. Wattage, I don't mess with that. Temperature. An NTC style thermistor, 25, that's fine. We leave that default. All right, for the MOSFETs, this is the controller temperature. Temperature cutoff. When you get too hot, you're going to start having issues. All right, so let's do, I have mine set at 80 and 85 cutoff. I don't want my MOSFETs getting higher than 85. If I'm like critical and I need to get back to the car and I'm already overheated on the trails and I just really need to go, I can actually come in here and raise these values in order to be able to slowly ride my board all the way back to the car. But this is kind of a safety feature, so I'm going to leave it as is. And as you can see, it did a refresh. We didn't get the values saved in there, so let's re-enter those and hit right. That's for the MOSFET. For the motor, sort of the same thing here. I'm going to 85 and 90, hit right. That's where I usually keep my motor cut off. Now, under general and advanced in motor config, you're going to want to set up your minimum and maximum voltage. If you have an 84 volt battery, you don't want to ignore your power above 84. I'm going to go ahead and just put it outside of the range I would realistically use. So anytime the controller sees power in that range, you're good to turn on. Going to go ahead and hit right. Okay. Now let's get over to the FOC. We have some, for the hypercore hub, we have some values that we like to use in here to make things run a lot smoother. We're going to go ahead and tweak a couple of these. Motor resistance, you want to increase this near 100 ohm, or mega ohm, sorry, near 100 mega ohm. If you have acceleration crunch, that's one thing. If you have braking crunch, that's another. Raising the motor resistance can help smooth out your motor when you have a strong braking crunch. And that's just making sure first you don't have an overly aggressive tune for brakes. So we're going to set that to 100. Let me see what the default is. Oh, there we go. I like hitting the default button. It saves me some time. We're going to hit right. All right, now one thing I want to show you is there's a relationship between motor inductance L and current KP. You'll notice that it's, how many decimal places over? 1, 2, 3 decimal places over. So you're going to want to lower this if you have acceleration crunch. You can leave it as is if you don't have any problems at all. But if you go accelerating and you're getting a hard motor crunch, you need to tune that out. And the way to do that is I'll often take this down to 180, but that means I need to, let me just hit the default. Get rid of that change on the end. I don't like having that change there. 180. Now down here, that'll be 1.8. And right. That's really the only things that I messed with. Well, the observer gain down here. For the little Fokker, and my experience, setting this at 0.75 has been pretty efficient. Haven't had any trouble out of that. So 0.75, I'm going to hit right. Alright, so that's it for motor setup. Alright, one other thing I'd like to highlight is the frequency. Let's go into motor config. Let's go to FOC and advanced. 0 vector frequency. I like mine at 28. Don't go any lower than 14 or 15, and don't go any higher than 30. And if you have any questions about 0 vector frequency, search that term on pev, and you'll get a lot more information than I can give you right now. Alright, we've got our motor set up, we've got our IMU set up. Now we need to load the package. Come all the way over here to packages, and we're going to install the flow package. Let me update the archive here, because I think there's a newer version. Whoa, what is this Trick and Trails package? What is that? By Mike Silverstein. Developed based on the float package 1.2. Okay, that's something to look into. I haven't even, I didn't even know that existed. Yes, version 1.3. So let's go ahead and install the latest flow package. What the flow package does, it creates an environment within the Vesc tool that suits our needs as one-wheelers or as float boarders. I don't know what today's term is for calling non-FM boards, but we still call them one-wheels around here. So installing that float package, we're going to do the same thing where it says it's done. We're going to go back and disconnect and reconnect. That's in the start screen. I should get an app UI page between start and real-time data. Boom, there it goes. All right, now I'm getting some foot pad detection there. It'll tell me the voltage on ADC1, ADC2. Okay, good to go. Now, let's make sure that we go back in and set that motor current. General current. And we're going to set it to 10. And just for ease of use, we're going to go ahead and just leave that. Alright, let me get these cables out of the way underneath here. We're going to test to make sure the motor turns. And it does. Alright, so far we're looking good. We've got a motor that responds to the IMU commands. It goes forward, it goes backward. We are looking pretty set up here. All we need to do really now is fine tune a couple things to make sure our battery settings match what the Fokker has, and our preference in temperature. You could have somebody else set all that stuff up for you. There's plenty of charts and available data on pev.dev. That's pev.dev. That's kind of our Wikipedia for this type of stuff. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and select a tune under App UI. I'm going to go to Tunes, and look at that. Let me hit refresh. I'm going to load my mission clone. Alright, so now I should be able to step on this board and hit balance. I'll do a check on that in a minute. I don't have a bumper or anything on there to protect this now. Alright, so there's one other setting that my preference is to turn this off. It's called run calibration at boot, something like that. And that's to where when you turn the power button on, it can take up to 10 seconds before it's ready for you to step on and go. That calibration, I don't necessarily need that calibration to occur every time I turn on my Vesc. So I disable that. Now I can jump on the board within like 2.5 seconds after I hit the power button. So here's where to get to that. That has to do with motor and the sensors. So we're going to go to FOC. Is it under offsets? Yeah. Run calibration at boot. I'm going to turn that off and hit right. So that way, power on, I'm ready to go. Alright, another thing you want to set up before you get going is you want to make sure all of your battery information matches in the float package also. So let's go over to float config and specs. Yeah, you want your loop hertz to be 832. Alright, high voltage threshold. I've got a 75 volt pack here. When do I want the high voltage protection to kick in? Oh, come on, refresh. There we go. How I'm going to calculate that? 4.3 times 18 would be 77.4. So let me turn that on up. And so that way if the battery gets too much of a regen, it'll protect itself. 4.3 is not catastrophic to your batteries, so you'll be okay. Low voltage threshold, 45 volts.
Whoops, that is not correct. Pardon the momentary dyslexia there. That should say 54 volts, not 45. You get that from the number of cells you have times 3 volts per cell. So 18 times 3.
And one thing I do here is I lower the value of the foot pad switch. The ADC1, ADC2, that's just left side, right side of your foot pad sensor. The reason I do this, I want mine to be just a little more sensitive. So if for some reason I'm getting a barely touch and it falls in between 2.5 volts and 3 volts, I want that to recognize it as a contact. You go too low and you can have an accidental ghosting issue. Dark ride, boop, boop, boop. Okay. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna need to do is set the motor current back to a safe level. I can't just drive around with it at 10 amps that we used for the motor test and the function check to make sure everything's working. So we're gonna go into motor, general, current. And I set mine up like so. 120, 100, 250. If you want to ask me why, hit me in the DMs or in the comments, and I'll try to explain. But yeah, we are ready to go. I've got my battery limits here. Just make sure that your battery current max and your regen max match the recommendation from your battery pack. Everybody has a different battery pack. There's a lot of different places where you can buy an aftermarket battery. Different cells have different properties. They can output so much and regen so much. So my values for this Z battery torque pack were taken from the properties of the P42A battery cell, because that's what this is made of. So do your homework, and if you don't know, just ask, and we'll take care of you. That's the best thing about the Vesc community that I've found is everybody is so willing to help each other out. I mean, if you got any questions, you just jump in the group chats, the Facebook Messenger chats. I'm sure there's Telegrams and Discords and all this other stuff the kids are using. But me, I'm just the Facebook Messenger or pev.dev. Or I can just pick up the phone and call Nico. But make sure that you have your homework done. Let's check a couple other settings really quick. Over in the app config, I don't use this a lot, but I want to show you what you're going to use in app config. Under IMU, here's where you're going to adjust your nose angle. Rotation, IMU rotation roll. What it is at right now is where you calibrated it in the IMU setup. If you want to get rid of the change, just make it a nice rounded number. If you want the nose to ride higher, you hit the plus sign and then hit right. If you want the nose to ride lower, you'll hit the minus sign and hit right. Try not to mess with any other values while you're in here, because you don't want to break anything. You don't want to mess with your other settings, but just the IMU there. If you want to move in a smaller interval, you only want to do a half degree. Boom, just like that. You can enter whatever value, just enter a half degree and hit right, and there you go. And back over to the important stuff, the float config, where you get to make a sick custom tune or just use a preloaded tune. Hopefully this video has been helpful to so many of you guys out there. I myself will be going back and rewatching this anytime I do another setup just to make sure I'm not missing any steps. So today's date is Friday, November 3rd. So let's see how long it takes me to post this and get it out to you guys. All right, that's it.